So we're diving into this really complex civil complaint filed back east in the Eastern District of New York. And it details what sounds like an absolutely staggering insurance fraud operation.
Yeah, staggering is the right word. We're not talking small scale here. This alleges a highly organized network, apparently running for years, turning, minor bumps and scrapes on construction sites into multi-million-dollar injury claims.
And just to be clear for everyone listening, our entire deep dive today is based purely on this one legal action. It's a lawsuit brought by an insurance company, Merchants Mutual, using the RICO Act.
Right, the Anti-Racketeering Act. That tells you something about the scale right there.
Exactly. And it alleges this enterprise, going back to at least 2018, involved lawyers, doctors, clinics, even funders.
And that's our mission today, really. We want to give you a kind of blueprint of how this level of alleged fraud works. We'll unpack the different players, the law firms, the clinics, the money people, and look at the specific steps they allegedly took.
The mechanics of it.
Precisely. How do you allegedly take a minor injury, or maybe no real injury at all, and build it into something that justifies, massive surgeries and huge settlements? It's a shortcut to understanding how these complex fraud rings are supposedly structured.
Okay, so let's break down this alleged fraud scheme enterprise, as the complaint calls it. You mentioned 4 parts.
Yeah, 4 critical components, all working together, according to the filing. You've got the lawyers, the Schweitzer defendants are named, acting as sort of the core management, handling the cases.
Yeah.
Then the medical providers, the doctors and clinics actually doing the treatments, allegedly unnecessary ones. Then the funders, providing the cash flow. And critically, the runners. They're kind of the recruiters.
The runners, let's start there. What was their alleged role?
Well, they were apparently the ones finding the claimants. The complaint says they targeted construction workers, often Spanish-speaking immigrants,
Yep.
And they'd offer them cash, like $2,000 to $3,000, just to sign on with the law firm.
Wow, that's quite an upfront payment just to sign up.
It seems like it, yeah. But think of it as seed money, an investment. Because the documents suggest these runners didn't just recruit, they also allegedly coached the claimants.
Coached them how?
On how to fake or exaggerate symptoms, the term used is malinger. And they coordinated the first doctor visits, getting the whole process started down a specific path right from day one.
So the runners find the person, the law firm takes the case. But these things take time, right? Years sometimes. Who's funding all that? The legal costs, the claimant's expenses if they aren't working?
Exactly. That's where the funders come in. This is a key structural element, allegedly. Companies like Case Cash provided what they called non-recourse advances.
Non-recourse, meaning?
Meaning if the claimant loses the case, they don't have to pay it back. So technically it's not a loan, but the complaint argues these advances created a really powerful incentive.
Wow, so?
Because sometimes getting the advance, or a bigger advance, was apparently tied to the claimant agreeing to have surgery. Yeah, so it potentially locks the claimant into the process, encourages expensive procedures, and fuels longer, more costly litigation. It aligns everyone's interests, except maybe the patient's actual health needs.
The money trail really tells a story. There's one example in the complaint, a $3.75 million settlement. How did that break down?
It's pretty stark when you look at it. So out of that $3.75 million, the funder, Case Cash, allegedly got almost $1.8 million back.
Nearly half.
Yeah. The law firm took about $950,000 in fees. And the claimant, the person who supposedly had the injury and went through surgeries, they got $500,000.
Less than the funder, less than the lawyers.
Much less. It really highlights who the alleged primary beneficiaries were. The institutional parts of the scheme, not the injured worker.
And then there's the structure of the medical clinics themselves. The complaint talks about dock-in-a-box schemes.
Right. That's a classic term in healthcare fraud. It alleges that people who weren't doctors in one instance, a single family illegally owned and controlled these medical practices, like clinics named 410 Ditmas and CMI.
And why is that illegal ownership so important here?
Because it potentially puts profit completely ahead of patient care. If non-doctors are controlling hiring, marketing, patient flow, maybe even treatment protocols, then the doctor's independent medical judgment can be compromised. The clinics might be set up not for healing, but specifically to run patients through these alleged rote protocols designed to maximize billing. So how did it typically start, according to the complaint?
Well, it alleges individuals were recruited to either completely fake an accident or, maybe more commonly, take a very minor incident and just blow it way out of proportion.
And were there patterns in the types of injuries claimed?
Oh, absolutely. If you
Yeah.
look at the cases described, it's almost always the same body parts.
Hmm.
Shoulders, knees, neck, and back. These are, notoriously high-value areas in personal injury litigation.
Okay, but what about the immediate aftermath? Like if someone really falls off a ladder, they usually go to the ER, right? They often did. But here's the kicker. The complaint highlights that those initial ER visits right after the supposed accident frequently found things like no acute traumatic injuries. Patients often had full range of motion. Nobody was admitted overnight.
So the objective medical evidence at the start didn't match a serious injury?
Apparently not, in many cases. But then, very quickly within days, the law firm would allegedly steer them to specific clinics. These are called the gatekeeper clinics in the complaint, like PPNY or Brooklyn Med.
Gatekeepers, meaning their job was to...
Not necessarily to provide accurate diagnosis, the complaint suggests, but more to generate the initial paperwork needed to justify extensive treatment.
How would they do that if the ER found nothing serious?
The allegation is these initial exams were predetermined. They followed what the complaint calls a rote protocol, basically just checking boxes in a formulaic way. The goal was allegedly twofold. First, to fool the Newark Workers' Comp Board into authorizing treatment payments, and second, to build that paper trail needed to support a huge personal injury lawsuit later on. It's like they were reverse engineering the injury.
And the level of alleged coordination is something else. There's an example, the Poic case. What happened there?
It's pretty damning, if true. The complaint points to billing records suggesting that less than 24 hours after this claimant was discharged from the hospital, remember the Schutzer law firm had already decided on his entire treatment plan.
Before even seeing the hospital records.
That's the allegation. They'd already determined referrals to 2 specific surgeons and physical therapy. It strongly suggests non-medical personnel were directing medical care.
Which seems like a massive ethical breach, at minimum.
Absolutely. So once these gatekeeper clinics established a supposed need for treatment, the next step, allegedly, was manipulating the diagnostic tests.
Like MRIs.
Exactly. The complaint names specific MRI providers, the Kolb defendants, and alleges they engaged in intentional MRI misreads. Meaning they allegedly systematically overstated minor things, maybe normal wear and tear, as serious traumatic injuries caused by the accident. And just as importantly, they allegedly omitted findings of pre-existing degenerative conditions.
Which would undermine the claim that it was all due to the accident.
Precisely. This alleged diagnostic fraud was crucial to justify the most expensive part, the surgeries.
What about other tests, like EMGs for nerve damage?
Similar pattern alleged there. Clinics like PPNY would run EMG tests and often find just evidence of radiculopathy nerve irritation. That's pretty vague. But the scheme allegedly treated this ambiguous finding as a definitive trauma-induced diagnosis, keeping the patient firmly on the path to surgery. It all fit the protocol.
Okay, this whole alleged system sounds incredibly elaborate. Maybe looking at specific cases will help illustrate it. Let's talk about Claimant A.
Right. Claimant A is a stark example presented in the complaint. He initially went to the hospital complaining only of mild low back soreness. He was checked out and sent home the same day. The records apparently showed 0 objective indication of injury.
Mild soreness. Okay. What happened next?
What happened next was 5 major surgeries.
A 5.
5. Performed by surgeons from the Total Ortho group, who are also defendants. These included 2 knee arthroscopies, a right shoulder arthroscopy, a lumbar spinal fusion, and a cervical spinal fusion.
That's unbelievable. For someone initially presenting with mild soreness and the surgeries themselves, were there questions raised about those?
Huge questions, according to the complaint. For Claimant A's lumbar fusion, done by a Dr. Lerman, the operative report filed was allegedly identical verbatim to at least 20 other reports for different patients.
Identical, word for word.
That's the allegation. And furthermore, that same report mentioned removing bisque material, but the complaint states no sample, no specimen was ever sent to pathology for confirmation. That's standard practice, usually.
Okay. What about the neck fusion, the cervical fusion?
That was done by different surgeons, Dr. Kumar and Dr. Jayamohan, also defendants. The complaint alleges that a later post-operative MRI showed the original disc herniation, the very thing the surgery was supposed to fix, was actually still there.
So the surgery didn't even accomplish its stated goal.
That's the strong implication from the evidence presented in the complaint, yes. It raises serious questions about whether the surgery was necessary or performed correctly.
Okay, let's switch to another case. Claimant D, younger guy, right?
Yeah, Claimant D was apparently 21 at the time, his initial incident. A minor thumb scrape while using a drill on a construction site.
Thumb scrape.
Thumb scrape. But, according to the complaint, as soon as he met with the law firm, the story suddenly escalated. Now it involved falling from a ladder, hitting his head, a much more serious narrative.
And the treatment that followed for this? Thumb scrape turned ladder fall.
It's honestly breathtaking. The complaint lists 70 physical therapy sessions, 70 chiropractic appointments, and 55 acupuncture visits.
Wait, 70 physio and 70 chiro. That's 140 appointments involving therapeutic massage, allegedly on the same days often, for a thumb scrape.
That's what the records allegedly show. And then, by the time he was 22 or 23, came the surgeries.
Let me guess. Shoulder, neck, back.
You got it. Left shoulder arthroscopy, a cervical ACDF, that's a major neck fusion, and a lumbar fusion, specifically L4, L5 posterolateral fusion.
Wow. And they didn't stop there, did they? There was also an attempt to diagnose a brain injury.
Right, a traumatic brain injury, a TBI. This diagnosis was allegedly based on something called a DTI test.
DTI, what is that?
It stands for diffusion tensor imaging. It's a type of advanced MRI scan, but the complaint calls the TBI diagnosis based on it flat clinical fiction.
Why?
Because, the argument goes, while DTI might be useful in group research settings, it's not actually validated or accepted in the medical community for diagnosing TBI in an individual patient, especially not for legal purposes. It seems it was allegedly used purely to inflate the claim's value.
And the lumbar fusion for claimant D, was there clear evidence he needed that specific surgery?
This is another really concerning point raised in the complaint. His lumbar fusion, remember, this is fusing vertebrae together, was allegedly performed even though a preoperative MRI explicitly stated there was no evidence of neural foraminal stenosis.
Meaning no nerve compression that the surgery would typically address.
Exactly. No narrowing where the nerves exit the spine. So the complaint alleges the surgeons essentially created the need for the fusion.
Wow.
By removing healthy bone during the procedure, a step usually done to relieve compression. But since there was allegedly no compression to begin with, removing the bone actually created instability in the young man's spine. They bootstrapped the need for fusion, as the complaint puts it.
So the surgery itself potentially caused the problem it then claimed to fix.
That is the very serious allegation derived from the medical records cited in the complaint, yes. Performing aggressive bone removal on a 23-year-old spine that showed no signs of instability or compression beforehand.
The level of risk involved in these surgeries, especially spinal fusions, it's immense. Suggests the financial motivation must have been incredibly powerful. What does the complaint say about the money trail on the medical side, especially for those total ortho surgeons?
Well, it points to a potentially huge conflict of interest. The principals of Total Ortho, including Dr. Lerman and his partner, Dr. Avanesov, allegedly got a significant equity stake ownership in a company that makes spinal implants. Amendia, later Spinal Elements.
Okay, so they stood to profit from the implants themselves.
That's the allegation. And what allegedly happened after they got this stake, their use of implants in surgeries reportedly skyrocketed.
How much?
The complaint charts it going from about 34% of their relevant surgeries in 2017 up to 93% by 2021, a massive jump.
Wow.
And here's another detail. The complaint notes that the specific implants they were using were primarily indicated for degenerative conditions like arthritis, wear and tear from aging.
But the whole basis of the claims was trauma, right? Accidents on construction sites.
Exactly. So the implants being used didn't even seem to match the supposed cause of injury. It suggests, again, that profit motives might have been driving treatment decisions over medical necessity based on trauma.
And this wasn't just contained within New York, right? They used facilities in New Jersey, too.
That's right. Both Claimant A and Claimant D, even though they were New York residents injured in New York, had some of their major surgeries, neck and shoulder, done across state lines in New Jersey at places like Bayonne Medical Center.
Was there a reason for that, according to the complaint?
The complaint suggests it might have been strategic. Doing surgeries out of state could potentially trigger federal laws like the Travel Act related to interstate commerce for unlawful activity, and also bring New Jersey state fraud claims into play. It adds layers of legal complexity.
Which seems to fit the overall alleged strategy, overwhelming the system.
Precisely. The insurance company argues that the entire scheme, particularly the legal strategy run by the Schwitzer firm, was built to just swamp the insurers, to thwart due diligence, as they put it.
How did they allegedly do that?
By constantly submitting more documents, more bills, claiming new injuries, scheduling more allegedly unnecessary surgeries, it created this never-ending escalation. The insurer is faced with this snowballing claim, And the potential cost becomes so enormous, the fear of economic loss basically forces them to settle even if they suspect fraud.
That brings us to maybe the most striking legal argument in the whole complaint, using the Hobbs Act.
Yeah.
That's typically used for extortion, right? Robbery.
It is, yeah. It prohibits interfering with commerce through robbery or extortion, often involving threats or actual force or violence.
So how does that apply here? Where's the alleged force or violence?
This is the really provocative part. The insurance company argues that the knowingly unjustified surgeries performed on these claimants constituted the actual force or violence.
The surgery itself?
Yes. The physical act of cutting into someone, removing bone, implanting hardware, allegedly without medical justification, that was the force. And the entire enterprise allegedly used that force, that physical violation of the patient.
To what end?
To extort money from the insurer. The argument is that the unnecessary surgery created the proof of a catastrophic injury, which then generated the immense financial threat, the fear of economic loss that coerced the insurer into paying millions in settlements. The physical harm to the patient became the ultimate weapon against the pair.
That really reframes the whole idea of medical procedures in this context.
Yeah.
It's quite a legal theory. #tag outro. So when you pull back and look at everything laid out in this civil complaint, you see this alleged chain, this system, where every piece depended on the others. It starts with recruitment, the runners coaching claimants.
Moves to fabricating the medical narrative through gatekeeper clinics and allegedly biased diagnostic tests.
Culminates in these incredibly high-cost, invasive, and allegedly unnecessary surgeries, potentially fueled by kickbacks or self-interest, like the implant ownership.
And finally, that generates these massively inflated settlement demands that weaponize the whole process against the insurance company, leveraging their duty to defend.
Yeah, and it seems like the sheer volume and complexity was part of the strategy itself.
Absolutely. The complaint suggests that having multiple claims, multiple body parts injured per claim, multiple surgeries per patient, multiple defendants, it was all designed to overwhelm anyone trying to investigate.
To prevent scrutiny.
Exactly, to prevent sustained scrutiny on any individual treatment, surgery, or provider. If you just flood the zone with paperwork and procedures, it becomes almost impossible to pick apart any single element as fraudulent. Who can effectively argue against 140 massages or 5 surgeries when it's all part of this huge, confusing package?
Right. It's the forest for the trees. So thinking about all the graphic details about the surgeries, the medical records allegedly showing little initial injury, the financial incentives like the implant stakes,
Yeah.
it leaves you with a pretty stark question, doesn't it?
Right.
What happens? What are the real risks to everyone involved, including the patients, when profit becomes the main, maybe the only driver within these really complex legal and medical systems?
It's definitely something to think about. And we'll certainly be keeping an eye on how the courts handle these very serious allegations as this case proceeds.